So I've made a lot of predictions in my life and I've always kind of kept them to myself. So I figured I may as well start making videos on my predictions so that when they come to fruition, I have some sort of evidence that I knew they would happen. So here's my prediction, my calculation, whatever you want to call it. My prediction is that in the next 10 years, there's gonna be a whole bunch of people that are extremely bitter because of social media. There's gonna be a whole bunch of people that are seeing what's possible. They have this extremely high expectation on life, yet continue to do nothing about it. A high expectation is great. But people are gonna have this high expectation, think they deserve what other people have, and then continue to consume and distract themselves. They're gonna stay distracted by their phones, by social media, and not switch from consumer to producer. They're gonna stay in consumer mode. So they're gonna have this extremely high expectation, do nothing about it, be bitter. And I look at every past generation and I always think to myself, well, they all kind of had some sort of excuse to ultimately fail. They all had some sort of excuse to not give it their all. Because the main problem was always a lack of access to information. But the main problem is no longer a lack of access to information. Which is why I feel bad for every generation besides Gen Z. Because the barrier is no longer access to information. The barrier is now discipline. And we've all got these little phones in our pockets, these little devices in our pockets, and we freak out when we lose them, but we do nothing good with them anyway. And you can do literally anything with them. Build a brand, communicate with people across the world. Eat better, be more fit, just learn how to work out, whatever it is. Speak better, be more clear on your words. Whatever it is. There's no longer a gatekeeper to information, at least right now. But that's a whole different topic. That's a whole different side prediction. But I could be wrong in this, but I'm not gonna get into that. But no one can really say anymore, well, I didn't know how to do it. I couldn't find the information. There's not any excuse with that anymore. Now give Gen Z a little bit of slack because the same device that has all the information is the same device that's engineered to entertain and distract you. So we kind of live in this paradoxical world where the same device that helps you build a better life is the same device that will help you waste your life. And none of us have any discipline, so realistically, everyone's just gonna choose the easier option. And when you end up with a whole generation that has no discipline and always chooses the easier option, we now have a generation that has a high expectation, sees what's possible, sees it constantly, consistently compares themselves to it, yet they don't even move toward it. And this whole gap between expectation and action is where bitterness is. You have to start failing. I'm not saying not to fail. I'm saying to fail because fail is lessons learned. Failure is a part of life. Failure has always been a part of life. Failure is also wisdom gained. But we need to understand that when you have this high expectation and you knew you could have done better, you just start living with constant regret. So my prediction here isn't just that people will be bitter, but people will be quietly bitter. You won't always see it with their words, you won't always hear it with their words, but you'll see it in the way that they act, how they undermine other people's success, and in how they cope with their problems. Because deep down, they knew it wasn't a lack of execution, or they knew it wasn't a lack of opportunity. They knew it was a lack of execution. And once again, I get it. Using these phones for good is so difficult. But you have to be able to get past that suffering. You have to be able to give 110% and see zero results. Now, I'm also not saying to just throw yourself in the deep end, because realistically, if you just throw yourself into the deep end of suffering, you're just going to quit because you can't handle it. You don't throw yourself into the deep end of the pool when you can't swim, when you can't even doggy paddle. It's the same thing with the gym. You don't throw on 315 pounds and try and push up the weight. You slowly build your way up to it. So what I'm saying is that you need a pain tolerance overload. You need to start making the difficult choices in the smaller things, in what you eat, what you drink, who you're around, how you act. Maybe even just starts with making your bed. And then as you make these difficult choices, or what you deem to be difficult choices in the moment, your shoulders get more broadened and more broadened and more broadened. And you're able to make more calculated risks, and you're able to handle bigger problems. But if you don't start broadening your shoulders now, then there's going to be a day where you're going to need broad shoulders because you've been forced into this position and you can't even handle it because you didn't broaden your shoulders hard enough, or for long enough, or for whatever. And that's another thing. I understand that life will throw you curveballs. Life will throw you curveballs, and even though you've been broadening your shoulders aren't ready for it. The weight's too heavy. Life got too difficult too fast. It happens to everyone at some point. Because difficulty is also relative. How broad your shoulders are. Which is why you need to start relying on God's strength first. Rely on God's strength in all things. It needs to be the foundation. So many people fail at certain things because they try and rely on their own willpower. They try and strong arm it themselves. But trust me, you won't be able to get past that suffering without God. You can go day 1, 2, 3, see 0 results. All the way up to day 1000, see 0 results. And all of a sudden you start saying to yourself, well, this is too difficult. It's too hard. I can't do this anymore. I give up. But what you need to start saying instead is, hey, God, you're giving me the opportunity to rely on your strength. So since you're giving me the opportunity to do so, I'm going to. And all of a sudden, day 1001 comes along and you start seeing results. Maybe you see the smallest amount of results. Maybe you see 0 results. But all of a sudden, the motion feels easier because you're allowing God to do it for you. And maybe you were going the wrong way the whole time. And God starts redirecting you. But you have to allow God to redirect you. God may redirect you to a different place that you didn't want to go to. God might be redirecting you to a different path. But it may not be the path that you want to be on, that your innate desires say that you want to be on. But it's the path that you need to be on so that when the time comes, your character is built up. It's the path that allows you to build your character so when the time comes, you're able to handle certain blessings. And that's another thing. So many people complain about not having certain opportunities. Yet the truth is, if these opportunities show themselves to you, you wouldn't even be able to handle them in the first place. It's not because you're ultimately incapable, though. It's because you're currently unprepared. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, Luke, are you saying that people are only blessed when they're ready? Because I see all these people that are deemed successful, yet they don't live righteously or the way that God intended. They got the money, the lifestyle, whatever. Are you saying that God gave them these things because he deemed they were ready, even though they were clearly not? No, I'm not saying that. And first off, understand that God cares more for your spiritual health than anything else. God's priority for you are not materialistic things. Materialistic things are just the add-on. And a lot of people think it's all about materialistic things. There's so much more to it. If you start praying for cars and watches instead of clarity and other people's clarity, God's going to take a look at you. He's going to hear what you have to say and think, well, dude, I don't think you get it. There's way more important things going on here. You're looking from a 60-year, 70-year, 80-year, however long you live perspective. But God's looking from an eternal perspective. So materialistic things are just the add-on and they're temporary. And at the end of the day, you have to be willing to give it up if it comes down to it. And when it comes down to it, because we all die and leave these things behind. Now, I've talked about this in multiple of my other videos, so if you want to hear more on that, just go find them. I realistically don't know the titles, but they're somewhere. Back to what I was saying though, people don't understand that there's a difference between success and a blessing. But it's not in the way that you think. A lot of people almost misinterpret it. Because you kind of hear how some people explain it, and there's a lot of logical fallacies that happen. For instance, some people say, well, you can determine if something's a blessing or not based off the fruit you bear. But the problem with that statement is that we're defining the source based off the outcome. We're saying output comes first. When realistically, you have to have an input regardless. Input goes into output. Input comes first. Here's another thing. Here's another example. If I take a test and I do well on the exam, on the test, there's multiple different reasons why I could have done well. It could be because I cheated or because I actually studied. Just because there's a cake on the table, it doesn't tell you who baked it. So there's a difference between a blessing and success, but people misdefine them. A blessing is what God gives you. It was out of your control. It's what God gives you to work with. And everyone's blessings are different. But success is what you do with what you're given. Success is subjective. And anyone can be blessed. An atheist, an agnostic, a Christian, non-religious. And we know this because of Matthew 5:44-45. This could be a stretch. Let me know if this is a stretch. But I'm going to read it anyways. But I say to you, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you, so you may be like your Father in heaven, since he causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and unrighteous. So everyone is given these basic things. Everyone is blessed. Everyone's given rain and sun. Now that's where I'm kind of confused though with this verse is, I don't know if that's just literal or it can be explained in terms of God gives certain things to everyone, but only certain people know what to do with it. But back to what I was saying, everyone is blessed. Everyone has the opportunities to do things. But they are all ultimately incapable, incomparable in comparison to heaven. It doesn't matter how well you do. It doesn't matter how successful you are. It doesn't matter how good you are. You're not perfect, so these things don't get you into heaven. And you have to be perfect in order to get into heaven because God is perfect and God resides in heaven, which means heaven is perfect and anything that's not in heaven has to be imperfect. So if God resides in heaven and he is perfect, then he cannot be surrounded by anything that is imperfect. Now, I'm assuming we all think if there's a God, he's perfect. And if he's perfect, then he can't be around imperfect things. And we're all imperfect, so it kind of sounds like we're all kind of in a bad scenario here. Which is why the only way into heaven is Jesus Christ of Nazareth, the way, the truth, and the life. So that we're able to replace our hearts with his heart, since he's the only perfect and divine human being to ever exist. And you may not be perfect now when you replace your heart with his heart, but it allows you to be prepared for the next time, for the next life.